Hello and welcome to Special Dialogue, a special program on TVRI World. I'm Siska Becker, your host. The Directorate General for Asia Pacific at the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Fernando Gonzalez Saiffe, is in Jakarta for a series of meetings and also a bilateral consultation with his Indonesian counterpart at the Indonesian Foreign Affairs Ministry for American and European Affairs with Mr. Umar Hadi. And now to know more about Mr. Gonzalez Saife's mission and his government's agenda in Indonesia, please join my conversation with my very special guest, Mr. Fernando Gonzalez Saiffe, sitting right here in TVRI World Studio. Good day, sir. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for this amazing opportunity to have a conversation with you.
Well, Ms. Siska Baker, it's really a pleasure. It's really an honor to be at your program, to be at a special dialogue that I've heard so many things about. And thank you for considering opening the space with you, with your auditorium, to share a little bit about Mexico and Indonesia's bilateral relation, to talk a little bit about Mexico and share all the commonalities and all the issues that we have together, not just in politics, in trade, in cooperation, but so many overwhelming issues. And I'm really happy to have visited Jakarta. This is my first time in your magnificent country. And thanks to our embassy, our ambassador also, that put together a very comprehensive program. We're celebrating this year 70 years of bilateral relations between Mexico and Indonesia, Indonesia and Mexico.
Wow, that's very amazing and very encouraging to hear, sir, and especially on the topic of celebrating 70 years of diplomatic relationship between Mexico and Indonesia. I would love to start there, actually. What do you think is the significance of the anniversary of our diplomatic relationship?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and thank you for putting that one. I would say that anniversaries, they can be 20 years, they can be 50 years, or in this case, 70 years. But they are a table in time in which we can take stock of the relationship, what we've done good, what we can improve. But for Mexico, the 70 years are really, really special. Bilateral relations started in 1953. Yeah. And they go back to the creation of the Indonesian state, which is very important. And for Mexico, opening and starting a bilateral relation with Indonesia was significant because it was the first country in Southeast Asia in which Mexico actually opened an embassy. We started a relation. 10 years later, your president, Sukarno, he visited Mexico. Yeah. Some years later, our president came here. And actually, I invite all your audience to go to a special photography exhibition that our embassy has put together, portraying some of the most important, significant events. But I would say that at the outset, and it's fascinating when you start reading the transcripts. Okay. It's all the testimonies in which your president, our president, and the people relate. We have so many things in common.
That's true.
Things in common about family, about traditions, about countries that are diverse, countries that share a huge heritage, and countries that, since the outset, we had a lot of commonality in terms of fighting inequality, sustainable development, climate change, and putting together these nation states that are so big, so diverse. Of course, as a parenthesis, Mexico is a big country, not as big as Indonesia. We're 130 million people approximately. Okay. Also a middle income and country that's slowly starting to have very strong presence in a region, just as Indonesia. So there's many things to look upon, and I came for two reasons, basically to commemorate the 70th anniversary, also to hold political consultations, to see the opportunities we can have in the trade agenda. I had some interesting meetings that I can share with you yesterday, but also taking advantage of the fact that Indonesia is hosting ASEAN this year, and I was lucky enough, and we can go over there, that I met the Secretary General yesterday. Okay. And we talked about how to strengthen Mexico's participation in ASEAN.
Wow, it's amazing to hear how productive you've been in this first visit to Jakarta. Now, if you don't mind, I would love to disintegrate and break down your activities in Jakarta, especially about your meeting with Mr. Umar Hadi, your counterpart at the Foreign Affairs Ministry of Indonesia. Could you share with us what were the highlights of your discussion, especially in terms of what are expected to strengthen the cooperations and relations between Mexico and Indonesia?
Yes, what we do, we have a formal mechanism that we call political consultations.
Okay.
And basically, in the political consultations, we take stock in a very comprehensive way of all the different issues that we share, that we think we can move together between both countries. So, of course, we agreed that the most important aspects to move forward the political relation is have more people-to-people contact.
Okay.
We can talk about big ideas, we can talk about big projects, but ultimately the most important aspect is to sit together, to break bread together, and starting to know each other better. As countries as diverse and as rich as Mexico and Indonesia sit together, we're going to find more issues in common. So we tackled the most important political aspects of our relation. We talk about the commonalities that Mexico and Indonesia play in the multilateral sphere. We are members of MICTA. We sit down in the G20 together. We just shared a seat as non-permanent members of the UN Security Council just last year, and we talked about all the different lessons learned in order to push together an agenda to promote peace and security. We talk about the diversity in our countries and how to protect our patrimony, cultural patrimony, which is very important. And as Mexico, we thanked Indonesia for its support it's giving Mexico to strengthening our relationship with ASEAN. And lastly, even though we talked about this issue yesterday at some meetings that I had, we talked also about our trade relation.
Okay.
We talked about, and I shared how Mexico is one of the most open countries in the world. Mexico has more than 50 free trade agreements with the European community, with Central America, with the Pacific Alliance in South America, and of course, Mexico as a country in North America. We share with the US and Canada one of the most dynamic trade agreements in the world, most profitable, which is the USMCA. For a lot of people know as NAFTA. I would say this is the NAFTA 2 agreement. So I shared this, and currently for Mexico it's quite interesting. The US is our #1 trading partner, but in the 10 top list, we have countries in Asia, and in the top 20 countries, many in ASEAN, including Indonesia.
Okay, that's good to hear. So the relationship is strong and business is starting to pick up. There's a lot of potential to pursue. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But now I want to ask you about how you're also here actually to explore the cooperation between Mexico and ASEAN. As you mentioned, you've met with the Secretary General of ASEAN, Dr. Kau Kim Horn, with whom you exchange views with on ways to enhance the relations between Mexico and ASEAN, including the signing of the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in Southeast Asia by Mexico that hopefully will be done in the near future. Could you please elaborate on that?
Yes, this is very, very important with Mexico, as currently Mexico is not part of ASEAN. And that's why we want to do a rapprochement. And basically, Mexico is a country that, because of its geography, we have many loyalties. As I said before, we are a country of North America, but we speak Spanish, so we're totally embedded in Latin America by culture, by values. We've had a long-standing relationship with Europe, to the Atlantic, but half of Mexican territory is to the Pacific. And the Pacific countries are one of the most dynamic regions of the world, including ASEAN. So this rapprochement that Mexico is doing has to pass necessarily through ASEAN. So Mexico has put its bid and its proposal to sign the Treaty of Cooperation and Amity. We're very thankful for the membership of the different countries of ASEAN that they have supported. They have agreed to bring Mexico to the table. We think we can bring important value added to the organization, also to a link to North America, to Central America, to Latin America. We're in the process just right now of ratifying the treaty internally. Our Congress is in recess, but just next week in September, they will be sessioning back again. And at the Foreign Ministry, we've asked our Senate to put the ratification of the treaty as one of its most important aspects. So this is going to move forward. Also very important for Mexico in regards to ANSEA is the role that it's playing in terms of regional peace and security. Yeah. For your auditorium, that I presume there are people interested in the international scenario. Yeah. We're living complex waters.
Yes.
We're living in a very difficult situation with the war in Ukraine, with the constant dynamic of confrontation between US and China, to name some of the few issues, with the pandemic, with the health crisis, food crisis, etc. So I think that Mexico and ASEAN countries as well, we can bring to the table our perspective of trying to push an agenda that has to do with developing nations to push forward issues dealing with peace and security, of solving conflicts in the scope of international law, very important in the scope of the Convention of the Law of the Sea. We believe in open waters, we believe in open trade.
Yes.
So there's many issues that we share together, and that's why we want to be a full-fledged members of ANSEA, and we think that the signing of the Treaty of Cooperation and Amity would be a very positive first step in order to keep enhancing our presence in the region. And I'm so thankful for the Secretary General of receiving me yesterday, just 1 week prior to the Leader Summit. And it's I know this is an exciting moment for Indonesia, for Jakarta, receiving world leaders next week, in which I'm sure you will put forward by the leadership of Indonesia as well, a scope to foster development and to foster peace and security.
Wow, it's really good to hear about how Indonesia and Mexico will be very strategic partners, not just in trading, not just in people-to-people relations, but also in keeping the peace and stability of the region, and also on a global level, because global problems need global solutions. That's and right. Everybody needs to work together. So, Mr. Fernando Gonzalez Saiffe, I've learned a lot so far from you about the bilateral relations between Indonesia and Mexico, and also about Mexico and ASEAN relations. Now we're going to take a little break, but afterwards, I would love to talk more about the multilateral relationship between Indonesia, Mexico, and other countries, especially in the MICTA grouping. Okay. Get ready for that. Don't go anywhere. Special Dialogue. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Special Dialogue on TVRI World. Still with me, your host, Siska Becker, and my very special guest, Mr. Fernando Gonzalez Saiffe, the Directorate General for Asia Pacific at the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Gonzalez Saiffe, I would love to continue our conversation now on a more multilateral relationship between Indonesia and Mexico, especially as we are joined together in MICTA, together with South Korea, Turkey, and Australia, an informal middle power partnership that is led by the foreign ministers. Now, could you tell us, please, what can Indonesia and Mexico do together within the framework of this group?
Yeah, thank you so much, Siska, for this such an interesting question. And I will start by talking a little bit how MICTA was born.
Yes, please.
It's a very new regional grouping, we might call it like that. It was created in the scope of the United Nations General Assembly at a time where we had other groupings. We had the G7, we had the BRICS, and then they say there's a lot of speculation on how it was born, but they tell me some of our ministers were sitting at the famous coffee clubhouse in New York. and you had the minister of Mexico, of Indonesia, of Korea, of Turkey, and Australia. And they said, well, we're middle income developing countries that share a lot of commonalities, countries that share the need for more dialogue, for more cooperations, countries that were and are members of the WTO, of the UN, of course, of the G20, countries that together right now encompass approximately 7% of world GDP, or third world of the economy. So this was a very interesting grouping, and that regularly over this 10 years, more or less, our ministers once a year, they sit together. It can be the scope of the G20, it can be at the General Assembly, at the UN, or it can be at a particular capital. And our countries have been pushing a development agenda that takes into account the objectives of the millennium development. Right now, with the issues of the war in Ukraine, calling for peace, for stability, but also focusing on other regions, like I said, the fight against inequality, the food crisis, to name a few, and looking for constructive solutions to global problems. So I'm happy that our leaders are going to meet next month in the UN, at the General Assembly again, and Indonesia has played a very constructive role, and we have a new foreign minister in Mexico, and they will meet next month. So this will be a very interesting issue to talk about, and I perceive that MICTA grouping will keep having more and more influence in the international scenario.
Okay, thank you, sir. That was very interesting, actually, to hear the behind the scene of the moment of conception of MICTA. Now, as you mentioned, it was created in 2013 on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York City. And one of the aims that was stated by the foreign ministers at that time was to support effective global governance. Now, 10 years later, how do you think this grouping has lived its promises, and in what way could actually it serve more to all the global issues that you just mentioned? And how do you see it in 5 years to come?
Yes, that's a great question, Siska. And the way I would put it is that both Mexico and Indonesia, we believe in multilateral mechanisms. But it's not a secret that multilateralism is facing such big challenges at the moment. The UN Security Council has not been able to advance the issue of peace and security with the war in Ukraine. The World Health Organization had a huge conundrum with the pandemic. Cultural patrimony is being violated constantly, so UNESCO has a lot of challenges. The WTO, in terms of trade, they have not been able to pass a comprehensive agenda in a long time in terms of bringing barriers down. So I see a very important trend right now in which regional organizations and regional groupings are having to have a lot of clout. And our challenge is that we keep fighting and strengthening democratic institutions, but also institutions that are effective. And that's where I see that regional groupings as MICTA can play a very interesting role, because they can be flexible enough to adapt their focus to concrete problems of the international scenario, taking into account that the world is not static. The world changes, and so the focus of our groupings have to change, adapt. For one reason and one reason alone, is to serve our populations, to serve our people, to keep promoting prosperity. And that's what MICTA is doing at the moment. So I'm very optimistic in terms of our grouping. I know Ambassador Alvarez Reina was sharing with me today that there's proposals of new countries that want to accede.
Oh, okay.
So we have also to make sure that the countries that accede, their first letter in the alphabet makes sense with MICTA. But regardless, they have to be countries that are similar in scope,
Okay.
that want to bring a value added to solve the concrete issues of the international scenario. And I think our regional organization will keep having more clout, more influence, and especially offering practical solutions to current dilemmas in the international sphere.
Okay, that's all very fascinating, sir. But please, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about these other countries that might also be partnering with MICTA. And do you consider also to be able to cooperate with these other countries, that they have to have the same principle, the same core principles as the countries in MICTA already, especially when you're dealing with this geopolitical instabilities that are happening throughout the world?
Well, I don't want to advance any particular names. It's the own countries that have to announce it.
Okay.
But
you don't want to pull the gun too soon.
No. It's the own countries that have to share which ones they would like to join the organization. But just to share with your audience that there's a list of countries that are interested, and in terms of GDP, in terms of influence to the region, it would make sense in the near future to think together with the regional members how we can keep growing our organization, but at the same time that it's effective and proposes we can reach common proposals.
Okay, sir, I think you've just intrigued our interest a little bit here.
You'll have to invite me again.
We'll stay in touch so you can get more progress about this very fascinating issue. Now, sir, as a seasoned diplomat, you must understand, in the heart of diplomacy is the people of the country. So after this short break, I would love to talk more actually about the people-to-people relationship of Indonesia and Mexico. Don't go anywhere. Special dialogue. We'll be right back. Thank you for staying with us on Special Dialogue, still with my very special guest, the Director General for Asia Pacific at the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Fernando Gonzalez Saiffe, on his first visit to Jakarta and, of course, his first visit to the studio right here on TVRI World. Now, sir, I would love to talk about Mexico and Indonesia, which are actually, geographically speaking, very distant countries. We are located on complete opposite sides of the world. But as you mentioned before, we have enjoyed a long and warm relationship. Why do you think that is? You've mentioned about the similarities and commonalities. Are those the reasons why Indonesia and Mexico have enjoyed such a fruitful and long and warm relationship?
Yes, thank you, Siska. And I've only been in Jakarta for a day and a half. Only a day and a half. But Ambassador Albert Reina was nice enough to give me a brief tour of Jakarta on just the day that I arrived.
Yeah.
So we went to the mosque. We went to the
Istiqlal Mosque.
Yes, we went to the church, and the first thing that fascinated me about Indonesia and that made me think a lot about Mexico, it's its diversity. It's how a country with the number of islands, the number of ethnic groups that can profess so many different religions, at the same time keeps itself united.
Yes.
And I learned about this concept of unity in diversity, which I think it's fascinating. And at the same time, same issue with Mexico. Mexico is a multicultural country. Mexico is a diverse country. We speak, our national language is Spanish, of course, but there's many languages in Mexico. And for many years, historically, I would say, just as in the case of Indonesia, we've maintained the need of promoting multiculturalism. And as opposed to other world trends that promote more assimilation against migration. And we think that multiculturalism actually can promote a bigger understanding between people to people, and this does not attempt to the state unity. Quite the contrary. If we know our differences, we accept the different historical, cultural value roots. We can live in harmony, we can live together. And this is precisely what I see, even though I only been here for a day and a half, that Indonesia is promoted proudly to the world. You're not building walls, you are building bridges of understanding. And that's something quite important. So Mexico and Indonesia, we have rich histories.
Yes.
We have rich archaeological heritage. I said we have multi-ethnic nations. We are full-fledged democracies.
Yes.
Mexico, just as Indonesia, we've been holding elections for the last 100 years, stable elections, for the last 30 years, alternating governments. Next year, both Indonesia and Mexico are going to have general elections,
Yes.
Changing leaderships, and Mexico as well, Congress. I think the same thing is going to happen past year. We have mega diverse countries in terms of climate. Mexico, look at this data, 15 and the 16 economies, Mexico and Indonesia, and I've read the perspectives. Indonesia would be the fourth country in terms of GDP.
Yes.
I think that in 15 years, projection also puts Mexico in the top 10 in the next 15 years. But at the end of the game, I think that we share values,
Yes.
we share interests, we believe in democracy, we believe in human rights, we believe in protecting the environment, we believe in granting health for all our populations, we believe in peace, we believe in security. So that's the main reasons that we were talking today in our political consultations. We can tackle and identify very concrete issues, taking into account that we share the values. And as we mentioned before, we are members in the UN, the WTO, APEC, MICTA, FEALAC. So I think the future, even though we're geographically far apart, it's a bright future that I'm sure it's going to be a very fruitful and positive, forward-looking agenda.
Okay, it's very exciting to hear how both Indonesia and Mexico are actually very busy right now, busy cooperating between our both countries, busy cooperating with other countries, and also busy developing within our own countries, because that is actually one of the commonalities between Indonesia and Mexico as well. In addition to being middle powers, Indonesia and Mexico are also two developing countries. Now, how do you think Indonesia and Mexico can support one another in terms of developing our nations?
Thank you, Siska. A very important issue here is to understand that bilateral relations are not conducted only from government to government. So we have to take stock of universities. We have to take stock about cultural institutions. After seeing you today, I'll go to an important think tank here in Indonesia, and putting all these organizations, all these universities, all the different think tanks together to bring solutions. We identified concrete issues on the trade agenda, but I was also talking about the need to put our young entrepreneurs, startups together, doing fantastic things here in Indonesia, in Mexico, bringing innovative solutions to present problems as well. So we want to see more Indonesian student and business people and scholars in Mexico, and I hope that we have more Mexicans here in Indonesia as well. And so my short answer is let's build a very strong building with the different areas of society that can keep learning and growing together.
Okay, so not just trading and economic partnership, but also in education, in transfer of technology, and in cultural programs. That would be a great way to bridge the people between our countries as well.
For example, last I was learning while I was traveling here that just Indonesia and Mexico, they have a very important workshop 3 months ago in terms of conservation of patrimonial sites and sharing lessons. So we think there are so many issues, and we can do positive workshops as the one that I'm sharing with you today at the moment.
Okay, very exciting to hear indeed. Now, talking about developments, one of the biggest development projects happening in Indonesia right now is, of course, the building of our new capital in Kalimantan, IKN. I don't know if you have brought some messages from your government to Indonesia in terms of how big is the chance of Mexico also, taking part in the building of this new capital of ours, because we are receiving foreign investments. But maybe you can just give me your view on this, and how do you think this new development project in Indonesia can actually be another way for Indonesia and Mexico to strengthen their relationship?
Yes, thank you, Siska. Of course, I will bring this, all what I've learned about the project of our new capital back to Mexico, as one perhaps of the most important infrastructure projects in the world, quite fascinating. The first concrete aspect is, of course, our embassy.
Yes.
will change site,
Yeah.
and the Mexican ambassador will be in your new capital. But we learned about the different polls that it's going to undertake. And again, this is another similarity that's happening with Mexico. Mexico at the moment, we have 3 very important infrastructure projects that cost a lot of attention and interest in my talks here. The first one is called the Interoceanic Corridor, which basically it's going to unite the Atlantic and the Pacific with a railroad system in the middle. So when you want to export to Europe, you don't need to go only by the ways of the Panama Canal. Now you're going to be able to use the Interoceanic Corridor.
Much more efficient.
This would be a project that the present government of Mexico wants to end by next year. Very important. Second one is called the Plan Sonora. Sonora is a state in the northern part of Mexico, just neighbor of Arizona, with a little strip of California. But this is the bet of Mexico for electromobility. The state of Sonora is going to be, they're doing solar panels. It's a state that has a lot of lithium. So this is the bet of Mexico to making the transition to electromobility. There's important projects and important investments that can be made. I've been learning that Indonesia is very rich in nickel.
Yes.
So we see a lot of complementary in this area. And the last one is called the Mayan Train, which in the southern eastern part of Mexico, it's going to connect by means of the Mayan route. Because what the present government of Mexico, one of their thesis is that even though we've had a free trade agreement with the US for many years, that has been quite successful, the US and Canada, the North American Free Trade Agreement, now USMCA. In terms of GDP, Mexico has been growing and growing, but some parts of Mexico inequality persists. So the bet that we have to be inclusive in the terms that we are growing, and this government is putting a lot of emphasis in promoting growth in the areas that have not been having this push since the original NAFTA agreement. One is the Mayan Train, which also will be a very attractive in terms of tourism for people interested in visiting this magical area of the world that would also ultimately connect with Central American countries.
Okay, I think that would be my top bucket list of activities to do when it's ready. If I ever get a chance to visit Mexico, that would be a fantastic experience. Mr. Gonzalez Saiffe, so far I've learned so much. Thank you for giving us so plenty of context and information on how Indonesia and Mexico can go strengthening the relationship, not just how Mexico can benefit from everything that Indonesia has, but vice versa, how the business people in Indonesia can also take the best opportunity of all the projects that's happening right now in Mexico. But we now come to my last question for you, Mr. Gonzalez Saiffe. I know you've only been here for not even 2 days, but I'm sure for a man of your stature, you must be quite observant. So I would love to ask you about your impression of Jakarta and Indonesia, and moreover, about your hopes and wishes for the future of relations between Jakarta, between Mexico City, between Indonesia and Mexico.
Thank you, Siska. It's been my pleasure to be in special dialogue with you, and I've also learned so much. And I'll say that my first impression that I see that Indonesian people like to smile. Just as Mexican people,
Yes.
we like to smile.
Okay.
I see that the social cohesion in Indonesia is very strong. I see how the social fabric is strong, which is also something that we share with Mexico. I see a vibrant Jakarta, a dynamic Jakarta, same as Mexico City. Mexico City is a city of metropolitan Mexico, 12
Yeah.
to 13 million people, with the
Wow.
outskirts 20 million. So we share this vibrancy,
Yeah.
cities in which you can do whatever activity learned, anything you want. And I go with a very important homework that it's to keep identifying. We did not talk too much about the trade issue.
Okay.
But even though the trade between Mexico and Indonesia it's 2 billion, almost 3 billion,
Yeah.
I think this is modest.
Okay.
I think the potentiality of keeping growing
Yeah.
is immense.
Okay.
So we invited Indonesia to think about the Pacific Alliance, a group of Mexico, Colombia, Chile, Peru, to
Okay.
ultimately join. We talked about thinking on reciprocal trade agreements.
Okay.
We talk about CPTPP, which we talked about bringing down barriers, which is very important as well.
Yes.
So my message is that we don't have to come back in the next 70 years. And with Ambassador Hadid, we were talking that perhaps we can do the political consultations every year or every 2 years,
Yes.
to having a specific roadmap in which we can tackle the political, the trade, the cultural, the development, and the people-to-people contact agenda.
Mr. Fernando Gonzalez Saiffe, thank you so much for sharing with us your time, your knowledge, and also a lot of inspiration on how we all actually can take part in strengthening the relationship between our countries. And although this is your first visit to Jakarta, I certainly hope this will not be your last, and please enjoy the rest of your visit in Indonesia. Thank you, sir, for your time.
Thank you, Siska. It was my pleasure.
And thank you all for watching Special Dialogue. We'll see you at the next edition of Special Dialogue only on TVRI World. Until then, take care and goodbye.